racial trauma, it hasn't really been studied as much as it needs to be. I mean, people have been talking about it for a couple decades now, actually, but the problem is that there hasn't been development of treatments in the US. Most communities of color have higher rates of trauma. So they need the trauma treatments, so much. And that's why it's important that they have access. So we study MDMA, psilocybin, which is found in like magic mushrooms. Mm-hmm. We can also use ketamine for psychedelic assisted therapies. There's a lot of fear and misunderstanding because these substances were made illegal several decades ago, not because they're dangerous, but for political reasons. There's a lot of fear for Black and brown people to be involved with anything that has to do with drugs because of the war on drugs, which has led to so much incarceration and surveillance and devastation for many of the communities. So they're more afraid. So they need more encouragement. They need more education. They need more assurances of their safety to be involved in the work.
9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
Hello and welcome to this new interview conversation with a very special guest. We're in Oxford at the Trauma Conference, and I'm really happy and thrilled and honored to have Monica Williams with us today. And I'm sure you're going to be very interested with what she's going to share with us around trauma, but not only trauma. Welcome, Monica. Thank you for being there with us.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's really delightful to be here in Oxford.
Yeah. So let me maybe start with your journey around trauma and how you maybe came to work on trauma, and because you're a researcher, right?
Right.
So you're going to tell us a little bit about what you're doing and how you came to that.
Right. Well, originally when I went to graduate school, I was interested in studying OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder. And after I graduated, I had an opportunity to study with one of the world's foremost leaders in OCD, Dr. Edna Foa. But she was also an expert in PTSD, and she was actually really growing more of her research in PTSD. So when I went to work with her, I had an opportunity to learn about PTSD and some of the cutting edge treatments and to be involved in the research in developing clinical trials. So that's how I got interested in PTSD.
And you've always been in research?
I've always been in research.
Right.
I love research.
So we're going to learn a lot of things with you.
I hope so.
So you began your research on trauma. What kind of research have you done?
Right. So the research that I did originally was looking at treatments for trauma, for example, prolonged exposure. And that's a cognitive behavioral treatment where it's really about helping people confront their fears. And so people with PTSD, they're usually very afraid of things that remind them of the trauma, even thinking about the trauma, talking about the trauma. And this gets in the way of them living their lives. And so the treatment involves people confronting their traumas, recounting their trauma stories again and again in detail. And it's a very difficult treatment. We find often that the clients don't really want to do it. And sometimes the therapists have trouble with it too. In fact, when I was at the University of Pennsylvania, there were groups for the therapists to just talk and decompress about the trauma and all the details of the trauma that they would hear from their clients. And so it was a really difficult treatment, but it works. And so I'm a big advocate of having people do the treatment. And sometimes you just need to be their cheerleader to get them through it. And it's so helpful when they get to the other side. But the challenge sometimes is getting people to do the treatment. So oftentimes they'll call our clinic. I have an outpatient clinic in Connecticut and in Ottawa. And sometimes people call. And when they learn about what the treatment involves, you don't hear back from them. So, or they come for the first consultation, and then when you explain the treatment, they don't come back. So this was one reason I got interested in psychedelics or MDMA for PTSD, because it seemed that people were lining up for the treatment. Like before, you couldn't get them to come, and now there's long waiting lists, right, for these research studies. And I remember first learning about the treatment and seeing how it worked in videos and training videos for the therapists. They would show us people before and after in the whole treatment process. And I was just amazed, because people were laying on a couch with headphones and blindfold and a nice warm blanket, and the therapist was sitting next to them, holding their hand, and people were just getting better on their own. Their brains were fixing themselves. And I was like, wow, that's what I want to do. I felt like I just had stone tools before, and I'm like, that's like a jet plane. That's what I want to do with people. So that's how I got involved in some of this work.
Okay, so you're doing research in psychedelics now?
I'm doing research in psychedelics now, yes.
Okay. Yeah. And what can you tell? Because people are sometimes both fascinated by psychedelics, but also very afraid of it.
Yes.
Yeah. What can you tell us about it?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of fear and misunderstanding, because these substances were made illegal several decades ago. Not because they're dangerous, but for political reasons. So don't get me wrong, there are lots of dangerous drugs that are illegal. But psychedelics, they're not dangerous in the way that some other substances are, like cocaine or heroin. They're not addictive, and people aren't usually looking to have them every day. So, so they're much less dangerous than even legal substances like alcohol. So,
when we're talking about psychedelics, can you just name a few?
Yeah, right. Well, I mean, I think the best known psychedelic is probably LSD, and that has a lot of baggage, so we don't do as much research with it because of so many misconceptions people have. But other substances we study include MDMA, which people may call ecstasy on the street, although on the street you don't even know what's in it, so there may or may not even be MDMA in it. So we study MDMA, psilocybin, which is found in like magic mushrooms. And also I study ketamine, which is not illegal. It's actually an anesthetic. They use it in children. So we can also use ketamine for psychedelic assisted therapies. And so those are some of the things that we study.
Okay. So the fears that the main fear would be like it could be addictive.
Yeah, that's a big fear people have. And I could understand why they'd be afraid of that, given the legal status of a lot of the substances. But they're not addictive, not in that way. So.
And what does it bring to the trauma field or the therapy world working with psychedelics?
Yeah, well, I think it really opens up a whole new world for us for helping people with traumas, because even the very difficult treatment that I shared with you, it doesn't work for everyone. It works for many people. I would say the people I work with who can get through the treatment, most of them get a lot better, but they don't all get better. And so we need more tools and more approaches.
And when you we talked a little bit before this. You're also very concerned about, and this is one of my concerns around psychedelics. It's that it's not affordable for everyone. Some population really do need those could really benefit from those treatments, but don't have access to it. Do you want to tell us about your maybe your how can I say it? Your will for this world.
Yes.
your what you want to change here.
Yeah. So one of the things that I study racism. I study discrimination and marginalization and the impact of oppression on people, which it can be very traumatic. So I mentioned when I was studying at the University of Pennsylvania, and I first started to treat trauma, the university, it's in Philadelphia, there's a large African-American population. And I worked with one woman who had become traumatized due to discrimination on the job. And we had this cutting edge treatment with world experts, and she was doing everything she was supposed to do, and she wasn't getting better. And the reason I discovered she wasn't getting better is because we really hadn't delved into her experience of racism and what her experience meant to her and how she didn't feel safe in the world anymore. Not only because somebody at work had aggressed against her, but because she really couldn't trust the workplace to be a safety net for her. And so this was something that I realized if we didn't address, there would be many people like her who didn't get well after being traumatized by racism and discrimination. And so this has been one of the things that I've also studied that's been very important to me, is that these treatments that we're spending so much time and effort developing are generalizable to everyone. And the same for the psychedelic treatments. We want to make sure that as they're being studied and as they're becoming unveiled and unrolled, that they're effective for everyone, that everyone is included in the research, and also that they're accessible, right? So they're affordable for everyone. That's going to be next step. Right now, we don't even have enough people of color in the trials, in the clinical trials, to say how well or how effective they are for these groups. And so that's one of the things that I've been really trying to sound the alarm about in these scientific communities that study psychedelics, is that we have to be more inclusive. We absolutely have to be.
Why is that? That is still an issue. It's still a topic. It's not. There are some people that are discriminated against, and even in those treatments that it's supposed to help the people who are the most affected, the more traumatized.
Yeah.
What can you say?
Oh, so many reasons that we have these problems, but we know that, like, for example, in the US, most communities of color have higher rates of trauma. So they need the trauma treatments, so much. And that's why it's important that they have access. But sometimes the problem, particularly with the psychedelic research, is that the researchers themselves they're not very diverse. And people who are signing up for the studies, they're already maybe part of these communities, or they're getting information about the studies from communities that are mostly white. And the reason that is because there's so much stigma around drug use, and there's so much surveillance of communities of color. There's a lot of fear for Black and brown people to be involved with anything that has to do with drugs, because of the war on drugs, which has led to so much incarceration and surveillance and devastation for many of the communities. So they're more afraid. So they need more encouragement. They need more education. They need more assurances of their safety to be involved in the work.
And maybe you've done some research on racial trauma, right?
Yeah.
So what were those studies, and what have you understood, or what can you tell us or recommend us to work on that?
Yeah, that's a good question. And so, racial trauma, it hasn't really been studied as much as it needs to be. I mean, people have been talking about it for a couple decades now, actually, but the problem is that there hasn't been development of treatments. There hasn't been ways of even measuring how someone would improve, because we didn't have the tools to assess it. So for my work, step one was we have to create some tools, right? We have to have questionnaires and measures and interviews so that we can diagnose and quantify the severity of the problem, not because we want to reduce people to a number, but so that we can start to do the science to show that we can help move the needle and that people can improve with effective approaches. And so I'm developing several approaches for racial trauma, which includes psychedelics for racial trauma. And I've published some on that. I've published a case study, actually, a very interesting case study of a woman who was also traumatized in the workplace due to discrimination and also had child sexual abuse, and how we were able to use ketamine-assisted therapy to help her recover from that. But what we really need are larger trials with lots of people. And that's where it really gets difficult to do the work, because the funding just isn't there for this kind of work. I've also developed cognitive behavioral treatments. You don't need to use any psychedelics for that. And I have a workbook actually that's coming out this month.
Oh, great.
Yeah, on
Wonderful.
healing the wounds of racial trauma. So it's a 12-step cognitive behavioral approach. And the very first chapter is becoming anti-racist therapist. Because we as therapists, we also absorb all of the baggage in our society, all of the racist garbage, right? We have to kind of purge that from ourselves so that we can work effectively with people who are suffering, because we don't want to dump any of that on them. And so that's the first step. And then the next step is the validation of their experience, of their suffering, because racism has a way of making people feel like they're crazy, like it's just happening to me and nobody sees it because nobody wants to talk about it. So they feel very invalidated when they try to talk to other people. And you can't really heal from trauma if everyone's invalidating you. So step one is validation, which I know seems very easy and basic for therapists, but it's so interesting when it comes to problems like this. Sometimes therapists forget what they know, and they might challenge the person, or they might, if you're from a cognitive behavioral tradition like I am, they might do Socratic questioning, like, well, are you sure it was racism? How do you know it was racism? How do you know it happened? And if you step back and realize, if someone told you they were raped, how absurd it would be if you asked them, well, are you sure you were raped? Are you sure that that's what they meant? Right. But we do this all the time with racism,
At one, in a very not so far past, we did say to people, are you sure? And even now, are you sure you've been raped? So, it's kind of, I know the validation is so important.
So important because people are invalidated for their experience. And that has to be the first step. And then the next step is helping the person get more support in their own lives. So it's not just the therapist validating them, but find other validating people and share with them so that they can also support you. And then we do some approaches to helping the person learn how to have a different relationship with racism, how to approach it differently when they experience it. So rather than internalizing it, to recognize, no, this is a byproduct of our social psychopathology. It's not me. It's the other person. It's the society, so that they don't take that in. And then starting to learn what they can do about it, to revisit some of the difficult experiences they've had and look at them through a different lens and start to feel more empowered. So that's the basis of that treatment.
And do you think, like, as a white person,
or
when you come to a conference like we are in, it's, I don't know, 80 to 90% white people.
Yeah.
What can we do to change that? And do you think we as white therapists can address racial trauma? That's a question.
Yeah.
It's a tricky question, but sometimes it feels like it's better to have like someone who is like you, who can really understand. And sometimes you don't have that. So what can we do?
Yeah, this is a really good question. And I have certainly some colleagues who believe that no white person should treat anybody of color because they just cannot understand, they can't understand our lives. I don't agree with that because I train therapists. This is one of the big part of my job at the university and in my clinics is to provide training and supervision. And I've trained many therapists, many white therapists who do this work very well. So I've seen them able to work with people of color and help them to get better. It just takes maybe sometimes more work on the front end to, dismantle our own racism because, as a white person, often you have a choice whether or not this is something you want to deal with. For me, as a person of color, I don't really have a choice, right? I have to accept and understand that this is part of my life. And I talk about it with my other friends of color. But for white people in our society, often they don't have to do that. So sometimes it means more training on the front end, more inner work to be ready for it. But I've seen lots of white people, very effective therapists. So I just encourage everybody to learn how to do the work. And it's going to be a little, like I said, sometimes it can be a little challenging on the front end, just sort of confronting your own biases. But we all have biases because we live in a biased world, right? So there's no way to get away from it. But we recognize it, and we think, once we recognize it, we can say, what can we do about it? What can we do differently? Like even this conference, my understanding last year, it was very, very white.
Yeah.
And this year they made an effort to make it more inclusive. So there's still a lot more to do, but I feel like because someone thought about it, we can make a different choice. If we just go on autopilot, then we're going to end up, doing these same mistakes over and over. But if we approach it thoughtfully, then we can do something different.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we try to do that at Quantum Way. We have an online conference every year on trauma, attachment, and resilience. And we're trying to have, at the very beginning, it was like mostly white male trainers and speakers, and bringing more and more women and more people of color and racialized people, being more inclusive, LGBTQIA plus. So it's, but it's, we need to. There's a will behind it.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, and so we have to work.
Yeah, I hear people sometimes say, "Oh, that's so hard. How do we do it?" It's like, no, it just takes some will. It just takes some will. Even with the research, people say, well, how are we going to include all these people? You just make a choice that this is important to you. And you say, okay, we're going to have some targets. Here's how we're going to meet them. We're going to check in every month. Are we meeting our targets? If not, what do we need to adjust? Just like you would any goal that you have that you're serious about. You just make it a priority.
And so you're doing some trainings. Is it only CBT, or do you include other modalities or other approaches in your trainings and in your research?
Right. Well, my training, was mostly cognitive behavioral. So, with the exception of my internship, which was psychodynamic. And that was I don't know if I consider that a blip or not, but but I do have lots of appreciation and respect for different approaches. It just, cognitive behavioral is what I learned, and it resonates more with me. Mm-hmm. And when I first started my career at the University of Pennsylvania, it was very sort of classically behaviorist approach, which, has its pros and its cons. Behaviorists are not known for their warm bedside manner. So I actually learned some other approaches as well. One of the approaches that I find very useful is functional analytic psychotherapy. It's abbreviated FAP, it's FAP, and it is based in behavioral principles, but it's a relational connecting type of therapy, which I found I really felt it was the heart that was missing from the CBT. Yeah. So I learned that, and I'm now a certified trainer in functional analytic psychotherapy. Okay. And I incorporate that into the work that I do to help people feel understood and connected and validated as I work with them.
Mm-hmm. That's the attachment part.
Yeah, exactly. And what I like about this approach is that I can talk with my clients about, they talk to me about an experience they've had, and I can reflect back an experience that I've had, and we can connect around it. So, which wasn't something that I could do with the original training that I had. So,
So now you work in Ottawa, University of Ottawa.
Yes.
What did you find different coming from the US to Canada? Did you work differently? Do you have the feeling the culture around mental health is different? Yes, about that.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think there's more similarities than differences, actually, even though I think Canadians would maybe be annoyed that I say this.
We will tell them.
But there's some differences too. And even just my own experience, as a Black woman in the States, it's different, it's a bit different where I'm living in Canada, in Ottawa. Don't get me wrong, there's still plenty of racism. I'm not going to be out of a job anytime soon. But I do notice that that many people treat me differently than they did in the States. So, for example, most of the time, white women in the U.S., they don't even speak to me. They don't speak to me. They don't look at me. And if I travel, if I do air travel, if I'm sitting next to a white woman, I don't anticipate that she's going to speak to me. And I was on a small plane from the States to Canada, and there was a woman next to me, and this white woman, and she was like, she kept looking at me, and I'm like, well, why is she looking at me? Do I have something in my teeth? I have a stain on my shirt. Like, why is she looking at me? And I realized halfway through the flight, she just wanted to make a human connection and say hello. And I had never experienced this. And then when I got off, I was getting out, she helped me with my bag. And this had never happened to me before.
Oh.
So
you had internalized that white people don't talk to you.
Yeah.
Because you're a woman of color.
Yeah. And I called my husband after I got off the plane, and I'm like, Matt, you never guess what happened. A white woman helped me with my bag.
Oh.
It was different. And so I thought, well, maybe things will be a little better here. So, and I have to say the university has been very supportive of my work. I actually left the University of Connecticut after only a few years because they didn't support my research with people of color and trauma and psychedelics. And since I've been to the University of Ottawa, the deans and the vice president of research have been very supportive, and that's just made such a huge difference. So, yeah, no, not every person's been supportive, but the people who make things happen have been supportive.
Most of them.
Yeah, so that's the important thing.
And you were saying that you have clinics. You have created different clinics. What kind of clinics do you have?
Yeah, I have. So when I was in Connecticut, when I was at the University of Connecticut, I started an outpatient clinic, and we specialize in treating OCD and PTSD. And now we have ketamine-assisted psychotherapy is one of the things we specialize in. And so I started that clinic. And then when I came to Canada, I was going to sell my clinic, actually. But then COVID happened and everything became online. So it didn't even really matter that I wasn't in Connecticut anymore. Everything was online, and it didn't seem like a good time to make that change. So I just kept involved with that clinic, and then recently started one in Ottawa as well. And we're actually right at the University of Ottawa. And we're doing some of those same things. We have specialties in all those same areas, and it's just a smaller clinic, but we're growing as the word's getting out. And there's a huge mental health need in Ottawa, in Ontario in general. It's very sometimes it's difficult to find good therapists, and there's long waiting lists. And so that was one reason I felt it was important to also start a clinic there, because there's almost no place you can go. It's actually even worse in terms of the lack of diversity in the mental health care providers. In psychology, I think I don't even think there's 5 Black psychologists in the whole province. So people of color, they can't.
Are those 5 in your clinic?
3 of them are at the University of Ottawa. Maybe there's a couple in Toronto. I don't know, but there's just not many. So people who are looking for somebody from their own communities, if they're from communities of color, they're going to have a really hard time. And so one of my priorities is to bring in diverse graduate students and train them, as well as maybe white students as well who need more training in this area, so that they can also work with, Black, Indigenous, and other people of color. And so that's really been the focus of my training.
And in your clinics, is it open to everyone, or is it really linked to your research? Or
Oh, no, it's open to everyone.
Okay.
Everyone can come. Yeah. I mean, because of the shortage of clinicians of color, actually, most of the therapists are white in my clinic, because I have not had time yet to train all the diverse ones that we need yet. So yeah.
Wow, that's a lot of projects for one human being.
I know.
How can you manage that? All this.
I have a lot of help. I had a lot of good support, and that makes a big difference too. So, Yeah, but I do stay busy.
Okay, before ending this wonderful conversation together, is there anything you want to add around what you're passionate about, or you want to tell people about, I don't know, trauma, hope, or whatever? What is really important for you to say?
Yeah. Well, I think what's important for me to say, a lot of people who are suffering from trauma, from racial trauma or other kinds of traumas, sometimes it's easy to feel like there's no way out. And I've seen so many people get well that I like to give a message of hope to people and let them know that, it can be difficult to get started, but but you can come out the other side. And it's just really wonderful to see people who have been, depressed and sad and withdrawn to just get the light back in their eyes and be able to reclaim their lives. And so I want people to know that there are many things that can help them. And even if they've tried a number of things, maybe they haven't tried psychedelic assisted therapy, or maybe they haven't had the right approach with the right therapist that understands, their world. And so these are important things that people can know and hold on to.
Oh, the main thing is find the therapist that really, that you get the connection with and that can help you.
Exactly.
And I like this idea of crossing, getting on the other side. Like sometimes we say, what is healing in trauma? Mm-hmm. How can we heal trauma? Do we really heal trauma?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good question, because I think, it always is with us in some respects. Even if you go through the healing process, it can be ongoing healing. Yeah, but that being said, people can make huge leaps and go from a place where they're depressed most of the time to where they're happy most of the time. So I consider that a victory.
Okay. Thank you so much, Monica, for this time together.
Oh, you're very welcome. It's been wonderful to have this conversation, and I hope all of your listeners find this valuable.
They will, I'm sure. I'm sure you will. Thank you.
Okay.